Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, so I suggest we get started. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today for this meeting of the Highways and Transport Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and post to social media. Please do make sure your phones are on silent, though, as I don't want any weird ringtones. Please be aware that the meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked exit and assemble at the rear of the building by the lunch area. Item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. So Dan, the Democratic Services Manager, please you report any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Bird, Coots, Dupre, and MacDonald. Councillors Goodliffe, Whelan, Goff and Slatter are substituting respectively.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we're still waiting for, is it Councillor King on the end as well? Okay. He's on his way. Okay. Oh, I think I've just seen it. So he's just walked through the back. Brilliant. Okay. Next up is declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interests? No. Councillor King, you usually declare a local access forum or something or other. Thank you. Over that one. Okay. So next up, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the Highways and Transport Committee meeting on the 5th of March 2024 as an accurate record. There is a slight amendment to the published draft in your packs relating to the Highways Capital Maintenance Programme. If any member does not agree, would you raise your hand now? I think Councillor Goff, you had a comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise a question. I'm trying to look for the right page now. But on the capital maintenance, whatever it is, on the capital maintenance program, we had a long and I thought very good debate about process and the need to be transparent in terms of what the process is of what goes into the hopper and what comes out of the hopper and what the criteria. I'm not sure the minutes quite capture the spirit or the substance of that debate, but that's fine. My key point is that I can't see the follow-up action, which I think we kind of implicitly agreed needed to happen to sort of build confidence with the members in the parish, something which is captured in the minutes, but there's no clear action, which I thought was part and parcel of that element of the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goff. Yes, I totally agree. Do you want to come in, Frank?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Goff. So the report itself also outlined the importance of reviewing the programme, particularly with members in town and parish councils. So happy to have that in the action log, but to give assurance to members that action is being taken forward. So there'll be invites very shortly in members' diaries to go through the capital programme draft form to review the prioritisation. So that is actually taking place, Councillor Goff. So, but yeah, very happy to have that in the action log because it's an important action to take forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Frank. I believe there was also an error with the outcome of that, where it said that it was resolved to, and that it didn't capture the amendment that was brought forward. But I believe that is now added to the updated minutes. So just to note that as well. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise exactly what Councillor Goff has raised. Certainly, my recollection was it was when Mike Atkins was presenting the capital maintenance programme. There was going to be a workshop for members, so we could hopefully have more information, so we could relay that to residents when they queried us why scheme in their particular village was not selected compared to one in another one. And I think that was the general feeling, I think, across the floor, that we needed that information. So it's good that it's, I mean, what prompted me to it, the minutes, was obviously it wasn't on the action log. Therefore, I look back at the minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things missed off the action log. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a matter of clarification on item number 203. I would have called it matters arising. There were questions about the low amount of money allocated to East Cams. The officers made an explanation, but I would just like to ask for a little bit more clarification, and they would be, was this movement of funds from one year to another discussed with local members? And also, is it absolutely sure that Bates Drove is actually in Cambridgeshire? And also, could I have the figures, please, sent to me at a later date for 2023 to 2024, so I can compare? Because although there's an explanation here of £800,000 being spent, it's not reflected in any figures I can see. So I'd like to see the figures for 23, 24 to make sure that East Cam's got its fair bite of the cherry, if I could.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure all of that is about the veracity of the minutes, but I'm sure some of that can be taken away.
Well, if the
separately.
minutes don't completely cover
no,
everything,
there is.
It's the only chance I've got for questioning it.
It's obviously not the only chance you get, that you do get to email in and ask things. I believe that was on the action log already, though, for more details. Is that correct, Frank?
Yeah, it's noted in the minutes. So Councillor Hunt, we'll pick up that detail when we have the specific meeting that relates to your area around the capital programme, but also just noted your request for information. So we'll follow that up in writing, Councillor Hunt.
Well, I'd just like to get a bit more of the details, particularly of the year 23, 24, what was spent.
Indeed.
I'd like to see
that
that 800 popping up where it should do, if I could, and confirmation that it was discussed with members. I suspect I wasn't a member at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. We can certainly take that away. Does anybody else have anything on the meeting minutes? Nope. Okay. Oh, Councillor Scholar. Oh, Councillor King, sorry.
No, I wasn't sure if I should mention this. I do have a couple of things to raise on the action log, if that's acceptable.
We'll come to the action log in a second.
Thank
you, Councillor King, though. I will. Okay, so we are now being asked to note the updated action log. Councillor King, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've raised this before. I'm always a little bit concerned when you just have in the last column ongoing or to be organised. I think it's really helpful just to set some sort of a date. It doesn't have to be a precise date, but I think the trouble is if they're just ongoing or to be organised, it's a bit kicking it into the long grass. So there are two items on there that I think deserve to actually have some sort of indication of when they're going to be progressed. Not asking for it now, but I think on future action logs, that would be really helpful, not just for us, but for our constituents. The other thing I wanted to just suggest was that we're still looking at acquiring a replacement for the reported system. And I know that there have been some problems with that, but I think it would be useful to have that on the action log as well.
Thank you, Councillor King. So I think John Munslow can answer some of that. I would just say that I agree with you, though, about the ongoing things. I think there at least needs to be some commentary with them as to what's going on with the ongoing status rather than just left there. But John, do you want to say something?
Thank you. Sorry, button trouble. Thank you. Yeah, with regard to the new asset management system for highways, which includes the an element that will replace the Report It tool. We are currently out to procure that system. There's been a slight delay in ending the procurement, but what we've done is we've rescheduled some of the implementation work. So we're doing some work we can do internally ahead of the procurement rather than doing it following on, to enable us to have confidence to meet the original timescales for the replacement, which was end of this year. What I can do is I can provide a short briefing that gives a bit more detail to committee members.
Thank you very much, John.
Chair, if I could just come back on that.
Of course.
I hear what John has said, and my concern is that I do think that this should come to the committee at some point. And it was on the action log previously, and then it disappeared because, you know, we were getting close to closing it down towards the end of the year, but then it just disappeared. So what I'm asking is that it be put back on the action log for report to actually come to this committee as it had been on previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. We can pick that up in our spokes meeting on where that goes. I know there was a delegation for it, but Councillor Sharp, should we pick that up in spokes as to exactly where that goes and what to do with it? Because it is important that that is done correctly.
I'll come back. Sorry. Shall I come? Yeah. I mean, I agree with Councillor King. I mean, obviously the first I asked for it on the last spokes meeting to get a report because I'd heard nothing about what had happened, and that was the first time when I received the report at spokes. So I do think it should have been more transparent. I think something should have come through this committee personally.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Sharp, sorry, we can definitely pick that up. It is one of the most important things that we are doing is this procurement. We do need to make sure we have a much better asset management system, and that the one that we have is simply not good enough for what we have. So that's really important. Councillor Daunton.
Yes, I want to come back to item 203 on the action log. And the point about being organised, if it would be really helpful to have a time frame, if not necessarily a date, to be organised in the next couple of months or something like that. I think it's an important briefing. So yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daunton. Yes, very happy for us to get a date in that ASAP, please. Does anybody else have anything else on the action log? Nope. Okay. Right. I will take the minutes and the action log as approved then. Item 3 is petitions and public questions. We received 2 petitions that have passed the necessary 50 signatures threshold for presentation to the committee, and we also have a public question. We'll start with petitions. Please can Katie Betts come forward to present her petition? Katie, it's the button in the middle to get you talking, and you have 3 minutes to present your petition regarding the condition of the footpaths from Cheston Level Crossing to Wildwood Estate along Lynn Road, Chestersham. Over to you.
Thank you. Very pleased to have the opportunity. I have been in some correspondence with both Alison Whelan and our MP Lucy Fraser, who've both been very supportive in this. But I'll just read you a brief resume. There's been a lot of correspondence, which I won't bore you with, but this is the gist of what we have to say. On behalf of the residents of Chettisham and Orchid Fields, North Ely, I'd like to present our petition. There's 66 names on it. We ask that the pathway from Chettisham Level Crossing to the new Willow Wood Estate be restored to its former width, so that pedestrians and those with pushchairs and wheelchairs may travel safely alongside the Lynn Road, where the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. The issue is not just about grass cutting. The pathway has become narrower because of the ingress of earth and weeds. We would ask to have the same safe pedestrian access as other Ely residents. In places, the pathway is now 60 to 65 centimetres wide. We include photographs to illustrate the problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you for bringing that to us. You'll receive a full written response to your petition within 10 working days of the meeting, and it will also be published on the County Council's website. So thank you once again for coming along. I would now like to invite Mr. Mark Seedon, who's joining us via Zoom to present his petition against the recently installed 20-mile-an-hour zone for Cambourne. Mark, you also have 3 minutes. Mark, you on Zoom?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Mark, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now, Mark. I can hear you now. Mark,
Okay,
you have
thank you.
3 minutes to present your petition, please.
Thank you. Again, hopefully this will be a fairly straightforward one. I started a petition on change.org a few months ago, just in response to the rollout of the 20-mile-per-hour zones across the roads in Cambourne. Started from some conversation with people in my direct neighbourhood who hadn't really heard of the idea to put the 20-mile-per-hour zones forward. It came as a little bit of a surprise to some of us. The petition achieved in total around 340 signatures, but I reduced it down to those with an 150-mile radius to about 260. The majority of those are in Cambourne and Cambridge, so they would be people who either live in Cambourne or people who work in Cambourne. I'll just read out some comments on the petition just so that some of those people are represented. All of these people are from Cambourne. So Mr. Neville Hawkins says, 20 miles per hour is totally inappropriate for Lancaster Gate, where pedestrian footpaths are sat well back from the road. Mr. Patrick McGrath from Great Cambourne says, the roads in Cambourne are hardly raceways. There are enough bends, etc., to make getting past 30 very difficult in most places. It seems like a total waste of money from the council that could have been spent better in other areas. Lastly, this is just a selection. Miss Petra Lucian, on the main roads through Cambourne, such as the road that runs alongside the sports centre and cricket pavilion, the 20-mile speed limit is ridiculously slow. Please bring back 30 miles per hour on the big roads of Cambourne and save 20 miles per hour for the little roads. So the responses were a little bit nuanced. Some people were asking, could we bring back 30 mile per hour on the main roads? If they're needed for the smaller side roads, by all means, and perhaps outside of schools as well. And lastly, I'd just like to point out that longer term studies of these 20 mile per hour zones have not shown that they bring any noticeable benefits to reducing collisions or the severity of casualties or driver speed. And I've highlighted a Queen's University Belfast 3-year study on the petition. And I think that's about it. I would point out just intuitively, it does make it a bit difficult to drive. You do have to look at your speedometer quite often to make sure that you're not going above the limit. And I think that might have a bit of a safety problem as well. Anyway, that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. You as well will receive a full written response to your petition within 10 working days of the meeting, and that will also be published on the County Council's website. Do thank you very much for coming along. It is really good to hear members of the public here. I'd now like to invite John Morris to ask his question on behalf of Hunt's Cycling and Walking Group. John, thank you very much for coming along. You have 3 minutes, and I think you know where the button is. Thank you.
Good morning, members, and thanks for the opportunity to ask my question today. Yeah, my name is John Morris. I'm the leader of Hunt's Walking and Cycling Group. We have 2,200 members on our Facebook group. 60% of our members are female. Many have young families, and we really want to work collaboratively with partner agencies, including the Vision Zero Partnership, Cambridgeshire County Council, district and town councils, to improve road safety, and in particular to make it safer for children to walk, scoot and cycle to school. My question today relates to road safety, and it is as follows. Mike Goff was killed on the 16th of March 2024 whilst riding his bicycle in Huntingdon, having been involved in a collision with a Ford Transit van. The driver of the van was arrested on suspicion of causing death by careless driving. Mike was one of the nicest, most generous, kind-hearted gentlemen I have ever had the privilege to meet, and indeed I'll be attending his funeral tomorrow afternoon. Dr. Nick Johnson, Mayor of Cambridgeshire, speaking at a meeting of the Combined Authority on the 20th of March, a few days after Mike's death, said, "Mike Goff's tragic death will not be forgotten. It'll be used time and time again to influence me and hopefully all of you to get to better places in terms of road safety in our area." I really hope members will carefully consider those words from Dr. Nick Johnson. Mike was a founder member of the Hunt's Walking and Cycling Group and a road safety campaigner. Mike was a larger-than-life character. He lived in Huntingdon and was a self-employed bicycle mechanic, establishing his own company, Roadies Cycles. Mike was much loved in the local community. Mike was an enthusiastic advocate for improving walking and cycling infrastructure and for campaigning for safer streets. 2 days before Mike was killed, referring to the death of Denise Hind, a cyclist who was involved in a collision with a lorry while cycling her bicycle at Witton, near where Mike lived, Mike posted on his own Facebook page, and I quote his words precisely, "Sadly, another one. How many more will be killed here before something is done about it?" Very poignant words indeed. Therefore, I respectfully ask the question to all members here today, the question that Mike can no longer ask himself. How many more vulnerable road users will be killed or seriously injured on our roads in Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire before we see significant improvements to our walking and cycling infrastructure? Thank you, Chairman.
John, thank you so much for your question. And I was so sorry to hear about the death of Mike. I never had the chance to meet him personally, but I think we all grieve for the loss of him and anybody else that's killed on our roads. It is vitally important that we do everything we can to increase the safety on our roads. Every person hurt or killed on our roads is one person too many. So I really do believe that. I'm going to hand over to Jeremy Smith to answer your question though more fully on what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The council was saddened to hear of the death of Mike Goff, and we send our condolences to Mike's family, friends, and members of the cycling community, of which he played a big part. Mr. Morris has raised 3 specific questions, although there are not locations associated with them, so our answers relate to the network generally. If there are specific locations that Mr. Morris or others would like to discuss further, then we will be very happy to review them with Mr. Morris and others. We acknowledge that many of the barriers on our network have been in place for a long time. There are pros and cons associated with the use of barriers, and these vary on a location by location basis. We do not have a blanket policy regarding their use, and it is considered and assessed as part of the scheme design process. Some of these barriers are there to provide safe exit from footways onto road and footsides, and the council supports a full and inclusive policy on active travel. Where we are made aware of any infrastructure that doesn't support such policies, these will be reviewed. Cambridgeshire County Council's adopted active travel strategy aims to make active travel safe, pleasant and convenient in order to become the preferred travel choice for local journeys. Having a strategy that is fully inclusive is currently at odds with the many barriers that are installed throughout the county. Where appropriate, we should be aligning ourselves with the guidance within Local Transport Note 120 on the use of access controls. We recognise there are a range of policy and safety considerations and strive to deliver safe and inclusive infrastructure. So again, I would reaffirm that we would be very happy to follow up with Mr. Morris and others to discuss the specific locations where he has concerns for accessibility and safety.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And thank you so much, John, for coming along and asking your question. Very much appreciated. And thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is the Department for Transport approved automatic number plate recognition traffic enforcement camera procurement. Philip Palmer, Parking Operations Manager, is presenting this item now. So Philip, are you online? Brilliant.
Hello. Yeah, rather insignificant thing in the scheme of things. My apologies for not attending, but I've got a bit of a back problem at the moment, so I'm not terribly active. Hopefully I won't take too much of the councillor's times. This is a fairly straightforward situation. The notice processing and permit systems is core baseline system, which allows us to undertake parking enforcement. We're currently about to start the third year of the contract. We can go extend a further year if we need to. But we're quite keen to look at the market at the moment. We've seen some interesting constrictions, but also some expansions in the market, which means we may well be able to source a better, a more effective system which will meet the needs of the future. Things are moving on. We want to progress the permit system in particular and the processing system across the board. So this is really good opportunities for us. So we'll be using the ESPO 509 framework, the renowned one for parking managers across the country, and we will kind of progress this as soon as we can, working with our colleagues in procurement. I think that's basically how I can sum it all up. The value will exceed over £500,000 if we go for the full 4-year term of the contract, and that's what's come to this committee. So, are there any questions or anything else you'd like to know about the systems or processes?
Thank you very much, Philip, and happy birthday to whoever it is behind you as well.
Sorry about that. It was my daughter's 18th. Yes, on Sunday.
As well, so happy birthday. Brilliant. Do members have any questions or comments? Philippa Slatter, Councillor Slatter.
Yeah, sorry, as a substitute, I'm unaware of any background on this one. But I was wondering, Mr. Hammond, does our contract procurement include a recognition of possible expansion of the scheme? For example, we get told in Trumpington that the rising bollards generally, when they conk out again, may well be replaced by ANPR. That sort of thing would obviously be an important part of our contract. We're not just replacing what's there with something newer.
Fundamentally, we always look to the expansion and development of the service. I mean, as we've seen recently, we're now working in South Cambs. We've introduced civil parking enforcement there. So we build into our contracts to ensure we can cover as many future situations as we possibly can. So yes, anything where we're looking at new developments around the city and other areas we're covering, we will ensure that the contract covers all of those areas.
Thank you. And the second question is there anywhere on My Cambridgeshire Maps where we can see where the county council has got ANPR cameras?
There is. I will have the link sent to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slatter. I do feel it's important just to point out right now, before anybody misconstrues any of this, that this is not some big grand plan to put ANPR all around Cambridge. There is no requirement for an STZ or anything else like that. That's obviously not part of this. This is simply a procurement for our standard ANPR cameras that we are using. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got one or two questions here. First of all, is there any possibility of a break clause? This is a 7-year contract, and does it include break clause? I'm concerned because if we decide, I believe, as I read it, we decide today to back this, we're committing this administration, the next administration, and actually the next administration after that. And that seems a little bit, to me, superficially, to be a little bit reckless. So I'd like to know if it's a break clause in this contract. The other thing is, I don't understand quite how restricting parking and generally restricting the motorist is going to boost the economy of Cambridgeshire. I'd have thought certainly where I live, people are saying they don't want to go into Cambridge because it's going to be the war against motorists. Also, I have concern that if this system is very effective, there'll be less people breaking the law, so there'll be less income coming in, which means that the administration at the time will have no choice but to put up taxes. So I'm very concerned about that. And as I understand it, the cost of the equipment or the contract, I think I just heard, was £500,000. That seems like, a lot to do with it, and I just have big concerns about the length of the contract, whether or not it's got a break clause, committing 2 administrations into the future, and I really don't see how it would boost the economy or support business. I think it would be entirely the opposite. It would be a disadvantage. People would do their shopping in other towns other than Cambridge. Those are my concerns.
Alex, can I just clarify? We are currently doing the paper on the notice processing system. Yes, or have I got my order wrong?
We're on the AMPR.
Oh, right. Sorry, I've moved on the second one. Okay. No, firstly, what I'd say is 7-year contract. One of the things about these camera systems, DFT approved devices, are quite expensive. The long life of it is essentially for maintenance. As you may be aware, we introduced first bus lanes in 2014, which we still have cameras running. They're running up 10 years, so we've had to extend the maintenance on those. But currently, we've expended that procurement process. So absolutely, we do not have to buy off of this procurement if we choose not to. If we don't need to replace cameras, which is one of the main things we're looking at doing at the moment, is kind of updating our cameras, some of which are getting up to 10 years old. But we can choose whether to purchase on it, and we have the maintenance option to maintain them. So fundamentally, I think it works very productively. On the question of restrictions in Cambridge, one of the big things about the introducers of the AMPR cameras, DFT approved devices, was to fully support public transport, and we've seen a massive improvement in that. I'm really pleased that we've seen a sizable drop in penalty charge issues for people abusing bus lanes and bus gates. I think this is showing a really positive side of enforcement, and actually it's improving the environment. So people can cycle, walk, and even drive in Cambridge without feeling too stressed by the traffic movement and activity. So I think all these things are quite a positive process to improve Cambridge itself.
Thank you very much, Eb. I will just say as well that obviously I totally understand the concern about long-term contracts. This administration has been hamstrung by quite a few contracts signed previously that we are, long bound to and unable to get out of. So it is important that we do have the ability to be flexible as and when it's needed. I think any administration should be thinking that through. Councillor Hunt, though, do you want to come back quickly?
It's a supplementary, Chair. Would the officer be aware that actually what's happened is the bus service between Littleport and Cambridge, which did have 3 buses, has now got 2, and that's where people would come into Cambridge to work or to shop, and now there's less of a service now than there has been. It's not getting better, it's getting worse, and that includes the areas.
This has to do with the AMPR cameras?
Because they're being frightened away, and they're not. The officer was talking about moving people into buses, and I was coming back to say that the buses are getting less,
Hunt,
not
I think
more.
we need to keep this on the paper.
I've finished now.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 or 3 things basically, and obviously we're looking here, I believe, at a 7-year contract. I thought, is it Philip, the presenter?
Yes.
Philip at one stage said 4 years, so I just wanted to make sure.
No, sorry, I made a confusion. My papers came through with my. I have 2 papers today, and the order was slightly swapped over. So no,
Okay.
right. This basically this gives you a chance to purchase and maintain. One of the key things about these purchases is maintaining. As I said earlier, we've got cameras which have been running 10 years, which is well beyond their life. So we need to build in time to continue that maintenance. So that's why the 7-year is there to enable us to make any purchases and replace cameras within that time period. We don't have to keep buying it within 10 years. We don't have to purchase any number within 10 years, but we have the option to do that.
Okay, if I can come, thank you for that. If I can come back on that, I've still got a couple more questions as well. Sure. But presumably there's a finite life to these AMPR cameras, because obviously as we software changes, software gets much better. So presumably there comes a time when we have to change them anyway, because the older machines won't work with the new software. Would that be a valid comment? Or
absolutely, absolutely. The primary concept of the life of these cameras was about 5 years. I'm really pleased that basically some of them exceeded that substantially, because we saved a hell of a lot of money in buying new cameras. So for us, it's a positive. This gives us the option, if they do keep running for longer than the expected time period, and they're still functioning and meet all the requirements for DFT processing and so on, then I would keep them running as long as I can.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear, because obviously we don't want to change them just for the sake of it. But equally, if they're working well, then we obviously keep them. Thank you for that. Just 2 points, and you've mentioned costs, so it's obviously over 500k. Just really on 4.2, it mentions if we do nothing, then it's got a negative impact on the council, and obviously I understand they're used for bus lanes and bus gates and things like that, but presumably we still employ I don't know what we call them now, not traffic wardens, but
civil enforcement officers.
Civil enforcement officers who go around, you know, to check the on-street parking and things like that. That would still carry on because presumably the ANPR cameras wouldn't cover that.
Civil enforcement officers have to actually visually see a contravention picked up by ANPR and issue a ticket. So that's kind of a bit of background information. But fundamentally, if we want to maintain our camera enforcement, then we need this procurement to actually provide the cameras to keep it going and maintain it. We will, of course, continue to maintain civil enforcement across the city and South Cambs.
Yeah, Councillor Sharp, I think it's just more said they are quite separate issues. We don't use cameras for enforcing parking restrictions.
No, it was more, I think it was more the comment on 4.2. I think it's a bit basically saying if we don't do it, we're not going to get any almost, or the way I read it was we're almost not going to get any parking income, or we're going to lose the ability to enforce it. But I understand, yeah, they are separate. I agree, Chair. And the final comment, I've forgotten what it was now. I'll come back. Okay, if not, don't worry.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have sort of 2 questions. One is that I think it would have been helpful to provide a bit more financial information in the paper. I'm particularly concerned about the first sentence in 2.2. All costs will be met by income recovered from penalty charge notices. What happens if that doesn't happen?
Then we have the parking account is quite substantial because it covers on-street charges and so on. And all those costs are ring-fenced for parking related matters and highways matters. I would say we've seen a major drop in bus lane and penalty charges issued, but it clearly exceeds the costs of actually running the service. One of the things raised by the actual your colleague on committee was the fact that civil enforcement don't have to walk the streets. They basically sit in a room and check the footage and decide whether they're going to issue a penalty charge notice. Obviously, time constraints are much more relaxed. So cost effectively, ANPR enforcement is substantially cheaper than putting people on the streets to issue penalty charge notices. We are confident that whilst we see a sizable drop in offenders, they'll still be sufficient to cover the costs.
And just following up on that, Chair, I did ask did make a previous comment about some financial information. Is there going to be an ongoing annual charge for upgrading the system? Because most other IT systems, there is an ongoing upgrade that is either free or is not free.
There is a maintenance cost within this. So, and that provides the back office system, which basically allows us to process it and push it through the notice processing system to issue tickets. So yeah, that's all covered within this process. Procurement.
Just to be absolutely clear on this, Chair, if I may, so you're absolutely confident that the figures stack up?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Councillor French.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do actually support this. I understand the congestion you have, and I realise that South Cambs have just introduced civil parking enforcement, which in Fenland we're quite envious of this. We have been trying to introduce civil parking enforcement since 2019, 5 years, and we're still no further. In actual fact, we're going backwards with the absorbent costs and the unrealistic conditions that you want to put on it. I urge you, Mr. Chairman, as the Chairman of the Highways and your Deputy, please come to Fenland, and I'll show you around and show you how we need your help. So I did ask the last chairman over 2 years ago to come, and I'm still waiting for him to appear.
Thank you very much, Councillor French. I actually have been in Finland recently. Unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to meet up. I think Councillor Shaler is there quite often as well, and I'm sure one of us will be able to come and meet up with you at some point to discuss it. Civil parking enforcement is so welcome though across the board. It's always sad that East Cambs hasn't decided to go down that route when so many other of our authorities are seeing the benefits of it. But very much thank you for that one. Do I have any other points on this paper or questions? Councillor Shaler.
I'll just make a very, very quick point that parking enforcement clearly is in the interest of the motorists as well. We all know the kind of inconsiderate parking and blocking of ways for the emergency services as well as buses, and the more that we can have passenger transport running on time, the more that the carriageway is freed up for use by those who need or indeed want to use their motor cars. So I don't think this is a war against the motorist at all, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaler. Yeah, these cameras are really important for just keeping our network running and operating smoothly, and making sure that where people are obeying the traffic rules and regulations that we have. But members, the committee has recommended to A, authorise Cambridgeshire County Council to commence the procurement of a DFT-approved ANPR traffic camera enforcement cameras for a term of up to 7 years through the Crown Commercial Services Framework, and B, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee to award and execute a contract for the provision of ANPR cameras starting in July 2024 and extension periods. Can I take it by affirmation? I don't think I've seen any disagreement. Councillor Hunt, do you wish to? Okay, let's take it for a vote then. Let's go to a vote. So can I see those in favour? Okay, those abstaining and those against. Okay, so it's all in favour except for Councillor Hunt, who's against. I think that is taken as carried. Thank you very much. And Philip, stay on the line because I think you are next for the next one, which is item number 5, which is the parking enforcement and permits system. And I think you were at the last minute put forward to doing this, so thank you very much for doing it anyway. So Philip, over to you to take us through this one.
Okay, I feel a bit churlish because I've done most of the blurb on this on the previous one. Fundamentally, notice processing permit system is the bread and butter of parking enforcement. It's where everything gets fed into. So we can issue penalty charge notice and gather any information and issue any permits. Currently have a contract, which we're about to enter the 3rd year. We have the option for a 4th year. We are looking to go into the market soon. We've seen some interesting developments. So we think there may be an opportunity to upgrade our systems and be a bit more future-proof. We're very keen to develop the permit systems in particular. I think most people, especially those who represent people in Cambridge, will know our system is not the best in the world, but there are great opportunities for us to do that. The total cost of this over the life of 4 years will exceed £500,000, or being very close to, which requires your approval. But we will be undertaking the ESPO framework, tried and trusted framework to do this, and working closely with our procurement colleagues.
Thank you very much, Philip, and I am excited about this one. If anyone gets excited about parking, the possibilities of what we might be able to do are, as somebody that currently has a parking permit, so back with our system. So I'm looking forward to new, better systems coming online. Members, do you have any questions, though, or comments on this one? No? In that case, then, I think we're... Oh, sorry, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I noticed that it's the proposal, the proposal is to procure it for 2 years beginning in June 2025. I know that South Cambridgeshire is making good progress on this, and obviously there's Cambridge, but what about Huntingdonshire and Fenland? How will this timescale fit in with those two districts adopting CPE? Because there are quite a few challenges, I know, in Fenland, certainly.
We will be building options to extend it for any other authorities joining. As we currently understand it, Huntingdonshire have their own systems and processes already existing, which they will probably expand. But we will have a system in the background which could be used if it's necessary. There may be some issues about crossing over the boundaries and so on, but this procurement will be sufficient to ensure we're covered for all eventualities.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor French has already intimated, at Fenland, we're very, very keen to introduce civil parking. And the main problem we are having is because we are being presented with County Council insisting that we do the job that they failed to do over recent years. That is, we need to be bringing the signage up to the required standard, which I understand is getting more and more expensive in the region of up to £1 million or more. What I would ask is, what can the County Council do to make it more feasible for us as a district council to introduce civil parking? Because this seems very, very unfair, we being able to being asked to pay for the failures of County Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. I don't believe that totally applies to this motion, which is about the procurement of the parking services, but I do very much take that on board. But I won't ask the officer for a response on that one, because I think that is a different matter that is also very important there, and that we do dig into it. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. As I read it, and apologies, I did refer in the earlier item to a paragraph that is from this part of the agenda. I misread my notes. So as I understand it, we've got a contract currently, which presumably, because it relates to civil parking enforcement, is that correct? It purely covers Cambridge City?
No,
so it's
at the moment.
No, it currently it covers all areas which we undertake civil parking enforcement, which also includes South Cambs. We built that when we procured that, even though South Cambs hadn't been introduced, but we built that into that contract to ensure we could expand if necessary, and as was proven necessary.
Okay, so it's currently active in there. And then picking up on one of your points, or one of your answers to Councillor King, Huntingdonshire have got a different system. I suppose that the geographical boundaries aren't going to overlap, but I just wondered how that works with if it's not a county, presumably then from that point of view it can't be a county-wide thing. It's district by district almost.
My understanding is HDC are going to run their CPE operation independently, which they're fully entitled to do. They currently have systems in place because they operate under the 1984 Act, kind of a watered down version of civil parking enforcement. So they're looking at expanding the current infrastructure.
Thank you. And finally, the contract basically enables us to issue penalty charge notices. So presumably we obviously are able then to link into DVLA records and that sort of thing and presumably with residents cover the current resident parking schemes as well. Similarly, infringements on that. That's currently where this is being done. And shall we say the ANPR contract on the previous item would be more, not exclusively, but be more for obviously bus lane and bus gate stuff. Infringements would be more able to be done by those rather than obviously civil parking enforcement officers who wouldn't be able to do that.
This system basically is, the core thing is notice processing, a penalty charge, whether it be through bus lanes or whether it be through an on-street ticket to somebody on WLO lines. So this system will facilitate all those activities.
Yeah, so coming back on that, the contract with the ANPR would link into this, because obviously if a car goes through on a bus lane or a bus gate, then it would then link into this IT software that would give us the details of the vehicle and obviously the registration and the address, so we can then send the penalty charge notice out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I like to think of this system as being plumbing to link everything together, that be it, you know, residence permits, all of those sorts of things through to charges to the whole lot as to how to actually keep it all operating and making sure the right people are getting tickets and the wrong people aren't getting tickets. And I'm hoping Philip's going to nod with me that I have understood it as the correct bit of plumbing there. That's good. Councillor French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I can answer the question Mr. Councillor King asked, the difference between Huntingdon and Fenland. The big difference is Huntingdon do have car parks they charge for. Fenland do not, and we will not be introducing car parking. I have been fighting this since 1993, and we're not going to change our mind unless the government, whoever it is, forces us to do so. But as I said, I would like, you know, some movement on there, some help and assistance, because the conditions that are proposed are totally and utterly unreasonable.
Thank you very much, Councillor French. Councillor Slatter.
Sorry, this is another substitutes question. I'm still struggling to work out the connections between this and the last item. You mentioned on the last item the fact that civil parking enforcement officers could do a certain amount of work at their desk rather than tramping the streets. And so my question is, who's monitoring the cameras if there's real-time camera work going on and making judgments about whether enforcement is appropriate? And can it cover the busway? Because some years ago, and I have emailed Mr. Hammer on this just now, there was some hope that the police and the councils could work together on issues to do with criminal activity at park and rides, and also people mistakenly thinking they can drive on the busway, and a certain amount of inconsiderate use of the busway. Also, your mention of the emergency services in this report, Mr. Hammer, makes me think if this can in any way help to make sure we see if there's been an accident to a cyclist, because otherwise it might not even be seen if they are alone on the busway. So how does it work? Who looks at the screens, if there are any?
Right, we're going back to the previous paper, which we tend to refer it as a sausage machine rather than plumbing, Alex, but that's our little house thought. Essentially, with ANPR cameras, we are the legislation is very prescriptive, okay, and it can only be applied for bus lane, bus gate contraventions, and purely against the motor vehicle. And our only source is accessing DVLA data to actually pursue those people. In regards to that, to actually issue one of those penalty charge notices, a civil enforcement officer, the same civil enforcement officer you'll see walking the streets, has to sit down and review the footage. He has to look at it every time an infringement happens. An evidence pack is produced, which is a stream of film showing the event happening. The civil enforcement has to say, yes, that's a contravention. There's no other grounds. He wasn't forced into it because a police car suddenly shot past or anything like that, or anything like that. He will check that and make sure it's valid. And if it's valid, he'll issue the ticket. So that's kind of the separation on those. So civil enforcement officers issue both tickets. In regards to ANPR, obviously it's a much more controlled environment. They can review all the footage and not always on real time, but they can do them on bulk and process them and get them through the system. In regards to the busway and things like that, my primary comment on this was legislation is very restrictive. We do actively engage with the police. Any evidence we can produce from our footage, which is only really triggered when events happen, we do and have done in the past, and we will continue to do that. We don't technically have a contravention we can put on the busway at the moment, so we haven't really applied it down there. But ANPR can be used there, but not through the notice processing system and DFT penalty charge issuing process.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Philip, which is, does TMA Part 6 change what can be done then with these cameras?
TMA 6 gives us a few more tools for the armoury. TMA 6 basically enables us TMA 6 is Section 6 of the Traffic Management Act 2004, which was enabled for the London councils many, many years ago, and has only recently been enabled by Parliament for local authorities. We've applied for this and we've been given the authority. What it means is we can now enforce banned turns, no entries and box junctions using cameras and issue penalty charge notices. So it's really just an expansion from the camera operation we had, which was purely related to bus lanes, bus gates. Now we can do band turns, box junctions, and no entries.
That can be done with our cameras as well now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear. Councillor Slatter, you look like you wanted to ask another follow-up question.
Well, if you don't mind, yes, because I am quite happy to be anti-motorist when it's the gatherings in park and rides, and we were led to believe that by the police that they would welcome higher quality ANPR cameras at the park and rides because they could then use them. Now, I'm very happy for that, but I feel it is one of these, well, not, of course, sort of a civil liberties issue, just to be aware of what's being done in our name. That's why I wanted to clarify it, because I'm quite happy for them to be deterred from coming to Cambridge, to be honest, for those purposes. And I'm also quite happy to pay the fines, which occasionally I've had to do when I've not been paying attention.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slatter. Sorry, there's just a question that on the forward agenda plan is some CCTV for the busway, and my question is whether it would involve some of this as well. Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Yes, Chair. If I'm preempting you, please accept my apologies. But I just wanted to thank Philip for coming along when he's not 100% and hope he makes a full and complete recovery soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to come back just very quickly. And it's following on from the response to Councillor Slatter's comment. Very interested about, and I'm presuming band turns, no entries, and there was one entering the box junctions. Would those have to be reviewed by the civil enforcement officer, similarly to the bus? Because I'm in support that we're using that sort of technology to capture what irritates motorists. I'm sure a lot of us, where people cause congestion by going into a box junction when it's not clear, that sort of thing. So that to my mind, I'm in support of.
Yeah, these will have to be reviewed. I mean, I think it's a really positive thing, which probably we need to promote better. That, you know, when you get picked up by a camera by a local authority for being a bus lane, band turns and things like that, it's not just an instant ticket goes whizzing through the system. It's reviewed. Somebody looks at it and makes a decision and makes sure that you have, if you basically contravened and there's no justification for it, you'll get a ticket. But there are circumstances we don't have to issue, and we won't issue if we don't need to.
Chair, very quickly, because you do hear it quite, or certainly I've seen it in the press where somebody's moved out of the way at a traffic light or into a bus lane to allow an ambulance or emergency vehicle through. So obviously the civil enforcement officers will be looking at that to make sure a motorist is not penalised unfairly because they've actually done the right thing and got out of the way.
No, we're not interested in issue tickets to people who've done the right thing. This is for the people who disregard our restrictions and don't show the respect to the city that they should do, and the county.
Thank you very much. I do just actually want to take the time as well to say thank you to our civil parking enforcement officers and the people that run the parking services. It is a very difficult job to have, and they do a fantastic job of doing it in a really considerate and friendly way. And I think it's testament to the work that they do that my inbox is very, very rarely has anything about parking tickets or anybody complaining about what they've had, which I think is a testament to work they do, considering how controversial issuing tickets can be at times. So thank you, Philip, to you and your team. Councillor Shayler.
Chair, I just wanted to mention another non-bus related use of ANPR, and that was in the previous committee we heard about Puddock Road and access only use of the cameras there as well. I think that's one of the examples that we can use ANPRs for now, isn't it, Phil?
Puttock's Road, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, it was a road that's caused 4 fatalities, and we are proposing to use ANPR as an access only.
If it's within our area, we can use ANPR as long as it's bad turns and identified contraventions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything else on this one? If not, then okay, the committee is recommended to authorize the procurement of civil parking enforcement services and a parking permit system for a term of 2 years from June 2025, with an option to extend for a further 2 years through the Eastern Shires Purchasing Organisation, and delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee to award and execute a contract for the provision of parking information IT systems and any extension periods. Can I take that by affirmation? I think most people are in favour. Councillor Hunt, are you saying you wish to disagree? Okay, let's go for a vote again then. So those in favour, please. Okay, so that's everyone except Councillor Hunt. Those against, Councillor Hunt. Okay, thank you very much. Interesting. Next is the performance report for Q3. Can I ask Richard Springbett, Governance Performance Manager, to present the report, please? Richard, are you online?
Chair, I'll do it.
Oh, okay. Over to Frank Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report in front of the committee provides a view of the performance system and the performance measures up until December 23. We just highlight for the committee to note that we are reviewing the overall framework so we get a clear story and picture for highways and transport matters presented to the committee. And in the report, it outlines the review of some of the indicators in the data that's still ongoing, which we'll start to report at future meetings. So, for example, it highlights the information that we've now got in relation to the indicators for cycling and walking, and we didn't have sufficient assurance around the quality of the data for previous years. We now have that assurance. We'll be able to report that from July onwards. Another example of that is we now have a system in place for recording, tracking and management for managing complaints. So notwithstanding the fact we've got that, we'll be able to provide an update in terms of how we manage complaints as a highways and transport service. And the report also highlights that we're now doing the data analysis in relation to road cluster issues as well, and that will be reported from July onwards. The committee previously asked for an update in addition to the indicators that you had set at strategic level, just an update on operational matters. So indicator 39 provides an overview of the current condition of the highway, but there's further information that provides information such as the number of potholes that were repaired during 23-24, which was just over 65,000 potholes that were repaired, and the level of backlog at the end of March, which was just over 6,900. The other thing that we've also highlighted, just an operational indicator, is the level of gullies that have been maintained. So you'll see on a quarter, so the figures that relate to the numbers that have been maintained and attended to on a quarterly basis. So just over 13,000 now being attended to on a quarterly basis, which does hit our target of our current target. And certainly for 23-24 was attending to every gully at least once every 2 years. So we have made a significant increase in that, but we'll still keep that under review. And another important indicator is assurance that we do inspect the highway for safety in matters. So the indicator there is 91% of the highway is inspected in line with our measures. The report also just highlights, as the committee's obviously also asked for, current vacancies within Highways and Transport Service. So that's currently at the end of Q3. There's 40 vacancies in the service, and there's information provided around the ongoing recruitment to fill those. And one thing I would just highlight just before I hand back to you, Chair, one of the most important indicators in this suite is that relating to those killed seriously injured or fatalities. We are at 318, which is just slightly above the target we set, but I would say, notwithstanding that target, that's a very significant issue that we will continue to address, and we'll work as hard as possible to get that number down to the lowest possible level. So whilst we've got a target, we'll go way beyond that, I hope, with the action that we're taking, particularly through the Vision Zero partnership. So that's a broad overview, but myself or other officers from Highways and Transport will be able to pick up any particular questions that members have in relation to this quarter's performance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Frank. And just to echo again that KSI point and how important it is and what an effect it has on people's lives, and that has to be one of the driving priorities of this service, is to make sure that people are safe in using our roads. Members, do I have any questions on the performance report? Councillor Daunton.
Please. Thank you very much for the report. My question relates to gully clearance, and it's good news, thank you, that more gullies have been found and that they will be entered on the system to be clean. I'd just like to understand a little more about how that will work out. There will be a 2-year cycle, but within that 2-year cycle, those areas that have caused particular problems will be targeted. I'd just like to understand how those two things will come together. That's one question. And the second question is letting us know the communication with members about the cycle, how the cycle works, when it will happen, when we'll be informed about our divisions. So 2 questions there.
Thank you. John Munsley, do you want to answer that one?
Thank you. Yeah, with regard to the call it the rough 2-year cycle, that's generally we will get round every gully every 2 years. Within that, then the team are using the information that they collect when they inspect the gullies and go back the next time as to how full it was, and also flooding information to within that cycle go to areas where we know we get flood issues or where we know those gullies are full. That is something that we are developing all the time as we gather the information using and recording it on the system we use, which I think we have talked about, called Carbon Tech. I will ensure that the information on where we're going to be when and what we've done when we've been there is shared more widely. We do have it. It is on the web pages and it does come through on the Highways update. But I'm working with the teams to provide more information to yourselves and communities on where we're going to be before we're there.
Thank you, John. I just do want to understand. I want to be absolutely clear about that. So take my own division, but this will apply generally. When an area has the gullies cleaned, if there are within those areas, say a road or 5 or 6 gullies which have caused problems, how would I know when there's going to be attention to those particular gullies and that they are logged as problems, so that then they will get special attention, so that any flooding that occurs in those areas will be dealt with? It's just for me to understand about the work and the communication.
Yeah, the team have recorded all the known sort of flood areas on a database, so they know where they are. So anywhere that has been reported to them through yourselves or through the LHO, they'll know where those are and should be targeting the gully emptying to keep those gullies clean, if that is what helps sort the problem out. Perhaps if I could take the detail of your question away and respond to you outside the meeting, would that be okay?
Thank you. Sorry, David Allett, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Daunton, because this is an observation that other members have raised as well about uncertainties about what the gully programme is, what the cycle process is, how we respond to matters out of that cycle, and what happens for gullies that don't just need cleansing, they also need repairing. And I think we acknowledge that information can and will be made much more clear in terms of that cycle over the whole year. Where are we going to be and when? As a rule of thumb, when we do the cyclical clearance, we go to all of the gullies and we inspect and cleanse them. And if we identify as part of the inspection that gullies are broken and need of more substantial repairs, then they shall go onto a list, which is then prioritised and addressed. And working with John and the team, we will make sure that that information is much more visible so that our communities can see what our list looks like, and we can report regularly on the actions that we're taking. But I do appreciate that Councillor Daunton's question is consistent with some concerns that have been raised previously about understanding the roles and responsibilities and processes relating to drainage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I think it's really important to say at this point that I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done on drainage and on all of our systems in maintenance in general, how we prioritise, how we have the list of these, how we have forwards programs. But I also think it's really important to see how far we've come, particularly with drainage. When we took over as administration, there wasn't even a list of all of the gullies. They weren't logged. And I think we are still finding gullies. This report points out today that we've added another 2,000 gullies that weren't known about beforehand. And I think it's really important to point out, just how far we've come in asset management. We have a long way to go, but we are getting to the point of actually now being able to have a proactive program, being able to plan these things where previously that just wasn't available. I mean, having to use metal detectors to find gullies is not conducive to a good gully cleansing program. We really should be getting them before they get to that point and having a map and having a network to be able to do that. So I think there is still a long way to go. And I think it's really important with this committee, we recognise there is a long way to go, but I think it's also really important to recognise that we have come a long way as well, and that we will continue to come a long way. So thank you, Councillor Daunton, for your question on that one, though. Councillor Sharp, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first one is touching on what Frank mentioned about the potholes. I think it was 65,000. One of the things, I don't know other members, what irritates my residents more than others is where a repair's done and then a few weeks later we have an issue. And it may be that it's a temporary repair, I understand that. So we have a communication problem, I suppose, with residents on that. But will the report it tool actually, I'm trying to think proactively, will the report it to give us that information? So if I get a call from a resident who says, my road the pothole's been fixed, but 2 weeks later it's disintegrated, I can look at the tool and say, that's a temporary repair, it's going to be done X, Y, Z. And the second question is around on page 62. And I understand recruitment's not easy, but looking at that, it looks like the number of vacancies in highways maintenance has gone up. Therefore, is that going to be an issue in terms of us obviously keeping track of keeping up to date with the maintenance? Thank you.
Chair, I'll just say a few things, and I think John and David both want to add to that as well. So in terms of the new system, this is why it's so critical, is the system will actually be able to be available to members and to the public as well, and actually show where all the defects are. And if you click on that defect, it'll just show a pinpoint on the map where a defect is. Will also provide information of when that's planned to be repaired and the nature of that repair. So that's why it's such a critical improvement that we need to have in place, because it will enable us to push information out so residents, members can actually find information for themselves. I think the other point I'd highlight is that the total number of potholes is one measure, but it doesn't tell anything about the quality of those repairs and whether actually it's a wise thing to do in terms of the investment. And the whole system really we're trying to move to is more planned maintenance, and also speaking both with LHOs and with local highway officers and with the contractors about making the right intervention, not just repairing potholes, but actually where it may make sense to make further interventions. So resurfacing larger areas where that clearly makes sense. So that's another thing that we're looking at as well. So David and John wanted to perhaps come back on some of the other points as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I can answer around the vacancies being higher in highway maintenance in the reported quarter than the quarter before, that's a turnover of staff. We are constantly recruiting to those roles as soon as people leave, and we're currently awaiting the start of a number of new officers. So is it going to be a problem? All I can say is it's not a problem now. We're replacing those staff. We'll get the people trained up and carrying out those roles as quick as possible. We're not seeing an increase in vacancies overall in highway maintenance. It's just that constant turnover.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd just add, in terms of the requirement of the new system, it's absolutely fundamental is understanding the nature of the repairs to be undertaken, the timing of those repairs and the quality of them. So it's the essence of why we're undertaking to bring in a new tool, whilst also working closely with the contractors and within the possibilities of the current tool in the intervening period to make sure we've got the best possible data and lines of communications. Because again, we recognise too many instances where our communities can can be unclear about the status. They might see a marked pothole on the network. What does that mean? So we recognise that the technology provides a significant opportunity for us to drive up the quality of information coming out on a live basis that's accessible to all.
Thank you very much. I do think it's really important to say the amount of work we're currently doing quality as well. I think our previous quality KPIs weren't accurately reflecting what was happening on the network. Mike Atkins isn't here today, but his team is doing a lot of work on making sure we get value for money and quality as for our repairs, which I think so many of our residents will find so important, and is, you know, so important as a council that we get value for money out of this, and that we do make sure that both we are asking our contractors to do the right thing, and that then they are following through on that and getting the right repairs. So I really welcome that work by the service as well to make sure we are getting quality. Councillor King, I believe you're next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to echo your congratulations and thanks to our officers for the work that they've done, because I think we are definitely moving in the right direction. And I also think that the format of this report is very helpful and makes it much more comprehensible. And on a strictly individual level, how nice it is to see John back with us. So that's really good. Now, my questions are, first of all, on indicator 241. I think we need to broaden out this particular indicator. This is page 59, because it isn't just about the number of 20-mile-per-hour limits. I think road safety for non-motorized users is a more complicated area than just that somewhat blunt instrument. So I would just make an appeal that when officers look at alternative indicators, they do broaden out their search a bit. And the other question that I had was to the following one, indicator 244, low level of response to local surveys. I hope that we are actually surveying parish councils in this, because I think that they are an invaluable source of providing good information as to how well we're doing. So perhaps I could have a response to those two questions or comments before I ask my additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think David's going to pick up the first one of those.
Yeah, regarding indicator 241, absolutely right. I think officers had reached exactly the same conclusion, that it was a far too crude metric, and they're giving further consideration to what a more helpful indicator would be, and we'll update on that in due course as part of the follow-up report to this one.
Thank you very much. And I will echo that I do feel that is a really important indicator, and that it is important that we develop it, because it's obviously safety for all our network, and we do really need to be considering those most vulnerable users. So it is important that we do develop that, even if it is a very difficult one to develop. Jeremy, I think you're going to answer the second part of Councillor King's question.
Yes, I think yeah, we welcome the comments. We do engage with the parishes, and I think sometimes we don't get as good a response as we want, but we do need to look at ourselves there and work out what we can do to make it easier and more straightforward for people to engage with us, if that's one of the obstacles that's seen.
Thank you very much. Councillor King, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a couple of other questions that I'll keep brief, if I may. This is looking at page 61, vacancy rates. It would be very useful to have a separate vacancy rate for local highway officers, because local highway officers are our main interface, and they're also really important to maintaining our network. So I think a separate indicator for LHO vacancies would be very helpful. So perhaps I could have a comment on that after I've just posed my remaining couple of questions. And these are on the performance Q3 report. And I noticed that there are some RAG rating boxes that don't have a RAG rating, they're just listed as contextual. And to be honest, that's not really very helpful. And I wondered if we couldn't do a bit better on that. So perhaps if I could just get answers to those two questions, please.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think firstly on your point about LHOs, Councillor King, while LHOs are really important and having them fully filled is important, I think it's also really important that we look at the system and make sure there is cover for them so that it is actually not so vital that you have an LHO. Having a single point of failure, to me, our LHOs are really vital and the work they do is brilliant, but they also shouldn't be a single point of failure in our system. So we do need to look at that one and how the LHOs function to make sure that there is cover available when, you know, we don't have an LHO in a post, and that functions almost invisibly to us as councillors, to the point where things do carry on working. David, though, do you want to come back on some of those?
Yeah, just on the LHO point, I mean, certainly happy to provide the indicator to you as for whether that's a strategic indicator as part of this paper or just an operational update, but certainly something I'm happy to share. But the reason I wanted to come in was to highlight that we've identified enhancements to how we communicate the LHO provision to members on a regular basis as and when there is a change, even if it's a simple change as an LHO being on leave, just ensuring that we've got proactive and complete comms going out as part of what we call the LHO patch list. And we are indeed looking at how we best deploy the resource we've got in a way that maximizes resilience and delivery. So further updates to follow on that, but you will see increased proactive visibility on relating to your LHOs.
Thank you. David Frank, do you want to come in on the second point, which was about the contextual rating of some of these?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So where it says contextual, that's because we're monitoring the information and reporting the data, but we've not set a target for those. But of course, when we've got a full set of that information, we could consider at a committee whether we actually do want to set a target that's linked to one of our ambitions or not. So that's the reason why it's contextual. So it's still useful information. I mean, things like walking and cycling rates, useful information by which we might want to set other strategies and other targets linked to that data rather than setting a specific target on that. So that's why it's called contextual. So it's for some of the committee to review in future versions of the performance system. Thank you, Chair.
I understand that, and I thank you for the reassurance, Frank, that you are hoping to set some targets for it, because you know, they can be a blunt instrument, but they can also be really helpful, I think, in driving up performance. And my final question, Chair, was about the KSI moving from red to amber. We heard very eloquently about two people's deaths, Mike and Denise, I think. And I'm just wondering why we have sort of moved the goalposts in order to go from red to amber. Thank you.
Jeremy, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, certainly. The indicator has been aligned with our Vision Zero targets, and we're measuring it against that. I think with regard to the point behind what you've said, though, to an extent, road safety is always going to be red while there are incidents on our network that cause casualties and fatalities. Nonetheless, we do need an indicator that shows how we are doing towards the trends in incidents that we are seeing and whether we are making progress towards it. So I totally understand the direction of your question. I think it is important that we have an indicator that shows that our interventions are having a positive impact, or whether there is, you know, whether they are not having that impact and whether we need to review.
Thank you.
Not sure I entirely understand that, Chair, but I'll perhaps have a conversation with Jeremy at some point in the future. And thank you for your patience. That concludes my questions.
No problem, Councillor King. And actually, your question has prompted me to kind of add on as well, which is particularly those contextual ones about growth in cycling and growth in active travel and pedestrians. I wonder if at some point it'd be useful to actually have a indicator which is the mode share rather than the growth, because particularly where we had the pandemic, the growth in cycling actually doesn't tell you anywhere near as much as what happened with the mode share, which is perhaps something that would be really interesting for us to be able to see rather than just the growth of one, because when everything's shrinking, it's very hard to see whether that's a good or a bad thing. We can look at that though, I'm sure. Councillor Hunt, you are next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to support Councillor King and congratulate the officers on the improvements that have been made, and I certainly appreciate the cooperation I get from my local depot. We have I can see the benefits in working from home, and there are benefits. However, I think if you're going to have a system of working from home, you really need to have proper management of that system. And what I'd like to know is, do we have a proper system of management? And for example, you can work from home if the circumstances are correct. Some people don't live in good, don't have the support. So what I'd like to be assured is that there's management was monitoring or checking up and managing the working from home situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. David Owlett, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes, we do. It is not a blanket approach between team either. Some teams necessarily have to be co-located all the time in a physical space, whereas other aspects of the service can operate differently. Each team has a team charter, and those charters are under continued review. From a personal perspective, and having been active in the depots, I see firsthand on those operational roles the benefits of being co-located, collectively problem solving in the same time and space. But as I said, we have opportunity to change and evolve the working arrangements on an ongoing basis. So we are seeing more of a shift to more people being working from home less, actually. But you're quite right that there are benefits that help people in accordance with our work-life balance as well. And it depends on the task, and it depends on the specific role.
So as a supplementary, do you visit the homes or the circumstances that people are working in?
I'm not sure it would be appropriate for us to be visiting people's homes and checking
concerned.
on them.
I don't know how to put it into words, Chair, but I can see that if someone has a spare bedroom and they have an office, they can work very well. If on the other hand, they've got 15 dogs and they share a flat with someone, it may be more difficult.
David, do you want to come back in? No.
We want to ensure that if our colleagues working at home are safe and productive, and we have processes to ensure that their work setups are appropriate to be safe, proper assessment of their seating, desk, IT equipment. And in terms of the productivity, there's no doubt at all that as part of our day-to-day management, nobody is off the grid in order to do our jobs. We're very communicated. Microsoft Teams is a very valuable tool for constant checking in. So we're able to both manage performance and safety without necessarily going and doing individual home audits, as it were.
Thank you, David. And I do feel the need to say that other virtual meeting providers do exist on that one. Councillor Hunt, would you like to do one last one? I think we're coming to the end of that part, but go ahead if you have a follow-up.
No, I'm okay.
I need to turn my microphone on and you need to turn yours off. Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I was going to follow on from Councillor Dawn.
Councillor Gardner, do you want to bring the microphone slightly closer?
I was going to follow on from Councillor Dawn with regard to gullies, and I was very pleased to hear what David said with regard to reporting back, because the most complaints I get is when a gully is found to be faulty, i.e. it needs additional works, parishes do not hear back as to when it's going to be repaired and then functional and to stop the rip road or wherever flooding. So I would certainly welcome the officers reporting back to say when certain gullies are repaired and how long they're going to take when there is a fault found with that situation. So I'm pleased to hear that that's the line we're going down. The other point I was pleased to hear that you were going to look at where, say, like on junctions, especially in rural roads where we've got a large number of potholes, it surely would be beneficial to do a larger patch, which what I think I heard you say you were going to look at doing larger patches rather than just doing the odd patch here and there. So I just wondered whether you could clarify that. And then on indicator 39, we've got unable to survey. Why were you unable to survey?
So, Councillor Gardner, on your first point, I actually think it almost follows on from the point that Councillor Goff made in the last meeting of our highways investment, in that we actually need really long lists that are publicly available with where things are at for all of this stuff. That we clearly never have enough money in highways, but it's important for everyone to know where the list is and where the line is drawn and what the criteria are and why they are where they are. So I would support that, not just for gullies. I support it for other road interventions as well. And I was actually talking to some of our service the other day about how we can go about doing that. And I really do support that idea of having a publicly long list where we can all check where we're at and what's on there. So I think gullies very much feed into that. I'll let David pick up on some of the other bits there.
Yeah, the question about unable to survey, this is where roads were blocked or access restricted in some way, or in some instances where the imagery captured was not sufficient to be used for survey purposes. So it's not based on the condition being too bad to survey, for example. It is that it is physically inaccessible or that our digital record is not appropriate for survey purposes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Goff.
I've got 4 points that I've written down, make sure I don't forget them. So first one, picking up on Councillor Daunton's pace and Councillor Gardner's about the drains data. I think this is, helpful. We do get a list, which I've raised with you, Chair, which I think is very well intentioned. I find it completely unintelligible as to what I'm meant to draw from it. So if we continue to get the list, it would be quite useful to get some explanatory notes as to how to interpret that. Second point is I note what Mr. Jordan said about the data, and I think it would be useful certainly to have a fuller discussion in July, because some of the data we're looking at here is 2021 data. So actually another couple of months and we'll actually have a better thing. Two more, first point on we had a lot of discussion about vacancies. Vacancies is one measure. I guess I'm much more interested, and it's much more useful, I think, to look at staff turnover as a measure of the issues. Vacancies is kind of like a product of turnover, and the problem with a turnover measure is we'll always say if it's bad, well, there'll be another recruitment exercise coming to solve the problem, but the root cause is retention. So I'd like to suggest that we also look at a turnover measure. And my last comment is probably pretty tricky, because there are all sorts of implications associated with it. But there's no doubt the most important measure of all of these is the indicators on fatalities and seriously injured. And I noticed in the footnotes on the commentary on 43B that there is a quarterly review board which sort of analyzes the root cause of some of those, or all of those fatalities, and I presume many of the serious injuries. And the measure, I wonder whether there is any way of isolating out of this measure, which covers a lot of causality, is to how we are doing with respect to any fatalities which have some form of attribution to areas where safety measures could have been improved or where there was defects. Now, I understand the difficulty of that measure, but that would really get to the fundamental, which is how are we doing? Because there are clearly some of these fatalities which are completely sort of outwith anything we could do, but there are some possibly which are not, and whether that was possible to get to the heart of the matter in a slightly more direct way. But I understand the difficulty of doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Goff, and very thought-provoking there. Just on your first point about the drainage list, I need to take responsibility for that slightly, in that we weren't publishing anything, and I said, get the data that we've got out, even if it's not particularly brilliant, it's better than no data, and we can work on making it more readable and informable later.
It was very well intentioned.
So I will take responsibility for that one. I do also feel it's really important to point out that when we have KPIs on vacancies, it's very easy to assume that the best thing to do is to fill all of those vacancies. Whereas I think we also really need to be cognizant that we are filling them with the right people, that this isn't purely a bums on seats operation. This needs to be the right bums on seats and making sure that we're recruiting the right people that will actually help us. So I think your point of retention is a very good one, but I think we also just need to be very aware that it's not just about making sure we have no vacancies, it's making sure that we have all the right people that we need doing the best job they can. But I'm going to hand over to David, hopefully to come back on some of those points and some of the bits on the road safety as well.
Yeah, and I'd just say on the drainage list as well, I think we can go better than just providing explanatory text. I'd like to co-design as best possible. So if there are issues with interpretation, we want to make it as easy as possible so that we can collectively decipher and understand. It is very much team sport, working with our local parishes to understand priorities, communicate where we're going to be and make the best impact. I think it's a valuable point about road safety, the recognition that there are actions that result that we take away and can put in place. So I understand the question and the point. I think it's important I reflect with the group and road safety colleagues about what indicators can arise from that.
Brilliant, David. Are we able to possibly take that as a little bit of an action to have a look at whether there is a better way we can do those KSIs? Because I think there is actually a really important point in there in understanding where things are our responsibility in particular compared to where it is perhaps slightly, I don't know, an accident is never an accident, there's always some cause behind it, but there are definitely some that are far more our responsibility than, random drunk driver.
I'd interpret the action of considering how can we be better, what's the most appropriate indicator to identify the county council's role in actioning lessons from fatality records.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Hay. Oh, Frank, do you want to go in first?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Just wanted to just build on what was said by Councillor Goff. So from a management perspective, we do have a more rounded view of workforce measures, which include turnover, the total size of the team, attendance rates. We also review exit interviews. So I think there is something we can reflect and provide a more rounded picture in terms of the workforce. So I think we can look at that so we certainly have that information at management level. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Frank. Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the Cyclic Gully programme that's regularly sent out, usually monthly. And the one I'm looking at goes back as far as 24th of July 23 and up to 11th of March 24. It's in excess of 110 lines, I would say. Of that, in excess of them relates to the west and the south. There's 4 relate to the north and in excess of 20 for the east. I've been looking at the ones that come out every month for the past 6-9 months, and that's the most I've seen on there for the north. Why is it so few being looked at in the north? Do we have so few gullies, or are they all in such tremendous condition that they don't need looking at?
So I'm going to let John deal with that. I will say that I've been looking at it as well, and there's very, very few in Cambridge City. So I feel you there. It's not just the north. There are certain areas. But John, do you want to talk about how we do the cyclic gully maintenance?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the cyclic emptying, they do an area at a time, so they work around the roads because that reduces the kind of down travel time. I'd have to ask the team about the detail as to exactly where they are and what they're going to be doing, and whether over the 2 years we get to that balance, but we will get around the whole county in the time. So perhaps that's again, that's a piece of information I can bring back to committee to explain in more detail what the cyclic regime exactly is.
Can I just come back on that? From the report, I understand that we found, what is it, 1,600 gullies we didn't know we had. It would probably be helpful to know how many are on the system for each area. That way we can get a proper idea if we're getting a fair shake of the dice, so to speak.
I'm sure we can look at that. I mean, I would say now, David Allen and I were talking the other day about the cyclical program, and eventually I really want to get to the point where we know where we're going to be over the next full 2 years, and you will be able to look at a system that will tell you when your gullies are next on the list to be done. We really need to get to the kind of member portal that tells you where all your potholes are, when all your gullies are going to be emptied, what roadworks are going on in your area, and what's being treated. That to me is the holy grail that we really need to be working on getting to that and getting our data in a format where we do have a facility to be able to interrogate it, because you are right that if you look at this in isolation, you have no idea when you are next on the list. And that can be incredibly frustrating for all of us. In particular, you don't know whether, a blocked gully, if actually you're on the list for a month's time, you might not worry so much about a slightly blocked gully if you know that it's coming. But it's really important that we get to the point of actually being able to have really understandable, logical procedures that we can all follow through, and have those lists of where things are going and what's coming up. That is vital to me. Councillor Slatter.
Thank you, and I do welcome the fact that there are these portals, and of course residents are better at using them than me, I'm finding, and they get in quickly on Facebook when somebody says, what about so and so, and they say, well, it's been reported. So to echo a previous comment, to have something there that says this is an emergency repair, we will be back, would be good. Indicator 43C, I was very pleased that we're using the word collision rather than accident, and I do that myself because I think that implies the physics of that encounter, and so the speed is always important. Having read the commentary, part of the question I had ready has been answered, because it is very much how do we cope with electrics. The introduction to acronyms means that I'm not sure whether I'm an EMU or a NIMU. If I switch my electric motor on my bike, which I know won't go above 15 miles an hour, do I suddenly become an EMU? But seriously, sorry, my grandchildren were looking at these acronyms too. What I am concerned about is that we do highlight collisions with electric scooters and bikes, because we know we're still waiting for government clarification, but we also know that speed is an issue. And so I know there's nothing on the actions section, and I don't blame you, but we will need to populate this with electrically assisted. I'm planning my mobility scooter, and it will be speed limited, but there's a massive amount of harm you can do with a mobility scooter or anything with a heavier battery, and you need to be aware of that, because I think that's the future, to get us out of our cars but still out of our houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slatter. I'm trying to get the image of an emu riding a mobility scooter out of my head right now. Do you want to come in on that one at all? Thank you, David.
I think it's a valuable point that we can take away and consider. Electric bikes is tricky, but certainly something we can go away and explore. They're obviously faster moving than certainly when I'm pedaling anyway. As for the scooters, the legal scooters through the scheme, we do have some very helpful data from the combined authority in terms of the safety records of those, which we will assess and can share a link to. But I think the point about the ever-changing nature of non-motorized vehicles is a valuable one that we can take away and consider in the context of the indicators that we bring.
If I'm being honest with you, David, I don't think it's just non-motorized vehicles. I think we're seeing a big change in the way that what we think of as a car is changing. And I think over the next decade or two, we're going to see massive evolution of things. So yeah, any way we can do that would be good. Councillor Nethsinger.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on the points that Councillor Gough was making about killed and seriously injured drivers. Say since I've become leader of the council, I get reports on every death and killed and seriously injured accident. And although I haven't been on this committee for most of that time, I have been following those reports because every single one of them is a tragedy. It's really, when I first started following those reports, there were some patterns that I was looking at, some of which were to do with the number of those events that involved older drivers in particular. But the longer you follow them, the more you realize that actually the patterns are, they're such tiny numbers, they bounce around all over the place. But there are over time some gradual patterns that I think you could, I mean, it takes a long time because fortunately, although the numbers are too high, they are small. I think there is a relatively consistent decline. That it used to be that about 10 years ago, an awful lot of the killed and seriously injured in Cambridgeshire and in other places were sixth formers driving each other to school and driving badly. I think the numbers of killed and seriously injured in that category have reduced significantly over the last 10 years. I think there are a range of reasons for that, one of which is that sixth formers can't afford to drive anymore. I think other categories have increased, and I think, but again, it's really, really difficult to pick this evidence out, but it is the kind of thing we should be looking at. I think accidents involving older drivers are on the increase. I suspect that accidents involving delivery vans are on the increase just because there are so many more of them around. I'm sure that Philip is right that accidents involving electric vehicles and electric kind of motorised scooters and things are on the increase because 5 years ago there weren't any of them. And we do need to be following these patterns and looking at how we can respond to each one of them differently. But I think the point that I wanted to make to this committee and when we're looking at these KPIs is that dealing with those things is not just about how you manage the structure of the highway. It's about who you talk to. It's about thinking about it in a kind of public health way about conversations. So when there were deaths with kids in schools, you used to go and talk to the sixth formers. Actually, we need to be talking to the companies about delivery vehicles. We need to be talking to the companies about electric scooters. And we probably need to be talking to the NHS about older drivers. Now, all of that is on the basis of a very unscientific me looking at stuff over 3 years. And we certainly need to be looking at that in a more specific way than my anecdotal evidence. But I think if we are looking at those KPIs, and we really should be because they are crucial, it's really important that we do so in a holistic way, looking across all of the ways in which the council interacts with different organisations. So that was the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nethsinger. Very, very good points there. And I do think it actually might be worth us bringing a paper on this to committee to look at all of those different things. But David, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to bring a paper. I just wanted to give some reassurance that the Vision Zero partnership, this is exactly the work that we do to understand that profile of vulnerable users and how that profile is changing and the measures that we can do on those. And you quite rightly anecdotally pointed towards younger drivers, older drivers, pedal cyclists, pedestrians and motorcycles being in there, and that profile differs by area as well. So we do have very granular and helpful data about where the more vulnerable parts of the network are, and I'd be happy to bring a paper on that to share that information more widely.
Thank you very much, David. And I think that that also follows on from Councillor Goff's point of the KPIs as to how we measure that. Maybe it would be good to consider it all in the round as to how we look at this going forwards. So thank you on that one. Councillor Shayler, I think you also want to make some points on this.
Thank you very much. Yes, I also wanted to talk about the important point that Councillor Goff made about dividing this up. And again, it's about Vision Zero. And Councillor Netzinger has mentioned most of the things I wanted to mention, only that obviously there are some things that we can directly influence and something less so. But even some of those things that we have less direct control over, for instance, the way the NHS functions, how quickly can we get injuries into hospital has an effect. And a lot of these are divided up by Vision Zero. And there our influence may be to lobby government for some of these things. So even where we don't have a direct influence, we may have an influence. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shayler. I also just want to take the time to call out the work of the team in doing the IRAP assessments. That's where we proactively go and look at our roads and see how safe we believe they are. Because I think we're all aware that currently we look at cluster sites and where people are killed or hurt and look at what we can do there, whereas what we actually want to be doing is predicting where people are going to be killed or hurt, and anybody being killed or hurt is too many. So we actually really need to be doing more of that proactive work in looking at where our roads are dangerous and how we can help them, rather than waiting for people to be either killed or injured. That's simply the wrong way of doing it. And we need to be really clear about how we are prioritizing there as well, because where there are areas where somebody is hurt, that it often jumps up the priority list. But we need to make sure that we're actually improving the safety of our most dangerous junctions first, rather than simply reacting. It's vital that we try and prevent as many injuries and deaths as possible, rather than simply reacting. So I really welcome that work as well, and I think there is need to extend that further. It's obviously, we've now IRAP assessed all of our A roads, but there's clearly work to be done on so many of our other roads as well, that also carry large numbers of users. We also see obviously a large number of our B and C roads be essentially primary travel routes for active travel users. A lot of active travel users choose not to go on the really busy A roads, but choose to take the slightly quieter roads, thinking they're safer. So therefore we need to actually be making sure that they are safer as well for those most vulnerable users. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and I think there could be a really good paper on that and everything else. Do I have anybody else on this though? Councillor King.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry for forgetting to ask this before. David touched upon the development of performance indicators. I've long requested a performance indicator around how many times we have to repair the same pothole. And certainly that's the area that I probably get most complaints about. And I would really like it if we could look at developing that, possibly as part of the new reported system.
Councillor King, you and I share a bugbear there. I call it the reopen rate. I used to come from software, and when a bug was reopened, that was, a very important metric to be tracking, and that's one that I would dearly love us to be tracking, of how often we go back to the same area, because for one thing, that's a really good metric of quality. And I think
absolutely.
I don't think it's currently possible for us to be doing that, but it is one that I'm really keen on us developing, and I think is crucial to the service. So yeah, just to agree with you there. Councillor Daunton, sorry.
Thank you. I know that Councillor Gardner and I will not pass up an opportunity to speak up for those in rural areas who want to cycle on safe roads. So I'll put that down again out in the open in the committee. But I want to bring up the point about white line painting in relation to road safety. And I think it would be really good, really useful at a future committee meeting to have an update on the white line painting and lighting at junctions as well, and how the white line painting fits into the wider road safety programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daunton. John, do you want to come in on that one? I know we're obviously doing a large part of white line painting as part of our investment, but
yeah, I was going to say that the replenishment remarking of lines is something we have done in a relatively reactive way across the county for a number of years, as a result of not having enough money to spend across the network. However, the additional investment in highways, we are directing around 1.5 million to improving road markings and signing. And what we're doing is, as part of the proposed programme, or the whole of the proposed programme, is to pick up those mandatory safety road markings that we haven't been able to do before, so that we can make that improvement to particularly our junctions for road safety. But again, it's one of those things where, as we start to take that proactive approach, we can make sure that we keep committee informed of how we're approaching that.
Thank you very much. Do I have anybody else? Councillor French.
Thank you. I totally agree with Councillor Daunton. I have been asking for over 2 years for a zebra crossing in the High Street in March to be repainted. There are so many near misses, it's unbelievable. So I ask you, please look at it seriously and get these white lines and yellow lines repainted.
Thank you, Councillor French. Anybody else? No? Okay. In that case, then let me turn to my correction page. The committee has recommended to note performance information and act as necessary. Well, I think we've done some noting, so unless anybody wants to disagree with that one. Item 7 is the committee agenda plan and appointments. The Democratic Services Manager will take us through the agenda plan and appointments. Dan, over to you.
I've just got an addition, Chair, to the July meeting, which is the 120-mile-an-hour scheme.
Brilliant. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Hunt.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to thank Sonia Hanson for really pushing ahead for these increased safety on the A1421. I've had meetings with officers, the police, and Sonia, and I'm sure I've got Councillor Shayler in the background pushing or helping as well. And I must say I'm looking forward to the report at our next meeting, and I've been very encouraged by the activity that's been surrounding this.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. That's very good to hear. I really just hope it doesn't need any ANPR cameras. But anyway, let's move on. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. It's
Sorry, Councillor Hunt, do you want to turn your microphone off first? Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's touched on what we were talking about just now, earlier on. Obviously, at the last meeting, we discussed the 20 million capital maintenance for the next 2 years. I've not seen are we at some stage going to bring a paper to this committee on how that's going to be allocated and spent? Because I've not seen anything.
David, do you want to?
Thanks, Councillor Sharp. Briefings being scheduled imminently to take through the process and the scoring of the capital programme as part of the engagement that we discussed at the last committee.
Thank you, David.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've got Councillor Slatter.
Yes, 2nd of July, the Southern Busway widening slot. I really appreciate David's forthcoming detail and reporting back that I can provide for the residents on how we got to where we are. I also know the officers have gone a long way with the work already in looking at the options for the future. The sooner we can see even a draft, it would be useful. And I would just like to know what sort of consultation in advance of the 2nd will be happening.
Thank you, Councillor.
Who with, I should say.
Say again. Okay, David will follow up offline with you if that's okay. Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I hope that some things that we discussed today will be added to the plan. And I noticed that the reserve date of the 3rd of September already has a couple of items in it. Can I suggest that, if possible, some of those items listed for the 2nd of July are moved into the 3rd of September to make the 2nd of July meeting a bit more manageable, because I think the meeting today illustrates that having a meeting with fewer agenda items helps in the discussion and in the decision making. So I'm a fan of little and often. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. We will definitely be looking at where things can be scheduled. Unfortunately, some things have to come at certain points if we want delivery, which is sad. But yeah, managing the agenda is important, and trying to make sure we all have as much time as possible to comment on it is important. If I have nobody else, though, and I see some people are packing up already, so I'm going to take that as most people think that things are done. So the committee noted the agenda plan, the training plan, appointments to outside bodies advisory group. That concludes today's business. And thanks to those members of the press and public who have joined us in person or watching the live stream. I now declare this meeting finished and you may go home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Well done, Bill. Well done.
I just hate this intrusion of the state into people.
Well,
I just see we're all going to be